what we want to do today is indeed speak about diversity and inclusion, but by sharing our own stories or stories that we have witnessed in the most authentic way possible. So yes, so this is going to be, we don't have necessarily a script. We will share with you. We have certain themes, 5 themes that we would like to touch and discuss about, but we are open to, oh, Oli is here, to adapt. Oh, hello, Oli, and thank you for joining. So I was just introducing our session and talking about how we want to do this today, and namely by sharing real, authentic stories that we have lived or witnessed or heard about from people that we know.
Yeah.
So what I propose is to introduce ourselves and to eventually share a story that could make us and the attendees understand why we're doing this and why inclusive leadership is important for us. So who would like to start?
I'll start happily, no problem. So firstly, thank you everyone for having us here today on this really important topic. I think personally for me, inclusion is really the key thing that I wanted to focus on personally today. I think that as organizations and as individuals, we hear a lot about the notion of diversity and inclusion, or now diversity, equity and inclusion. But actually, inclusion, when I think about inclusion, it has almost the least weight, right? So as an organization, it's really easy for us to potentially measure diversity. We can count people who provide the data and say, I'm female, or I'm a Black female, or whatever the data is. But it's really hard to measure inclusion. It's really hard to measure how someone feels. And it was something that really got me thinking a few years ago. So this topic of inclusive leadership and creating inclusive environments and inclusive workplaces, I think is something that is ever so important, particularly right now. So we wanted to have this discussion with you, and essentially take you through a series of, as Stefania said, stories by us doing some Q&A, and you're welcome to also jump in if you have any questions. In terms of just some introductions, I work-wise, I'm a management consultant. I spent all of my career with Accenture, where I was leading a lot of merger and acquisition type work, so business restructuring in the UK. And my clients typically are within financial services and capital market firms specifically. I recently moved to Ernst & Young, so another consultancy firm, where I am leading the strategy and transactions work that we do, again, very similar to M&A type work, merger and acquisitions. So I lead the work we do for strategy and transactions across Asia Pac, because I've also moved to Singapore from Europe, but I lead the work we do across Asia Pac for capital markets. And coming from a very male dominated and also white dominated industry, it's a really good conversation to be having for me. I grew up in a white neighborhood in London in the UK. So I grew up actually knowing that I needed to fit in. And I've spoken before, I've done a lot of these speaking events on this topic. And I've spoken before about one of my very earliest memories where we were moving to Wimbledon, because I was born in a town called Brixton in London. And we moved when I was about 3, 4, just old enough to remember. And there were 4, I had 3 other siblings at the time. I now have 4 other siblings. But I remember on moving day, Mum had said to us in the car, shh, don't tell anyone that you've come from Brixton. Now, for those of you who don't know, Brixton in the UK, back when I was growing up, so in the late 80s, Brixton in the UK was notoriously a place with violence and with also a lot of Black people in the community. Whereas Wimbledon was the stark opposite, right? If I say Wimbledon to people on this call, you'll probably all think of Wimbledon tennis, which is correct because I was also a ball girl. But there was a complete stark difference. So from day one, I learned to fit in. So by the time I got to the workplace, I was already, normally fitted in. But there came an aha moment in my career when I realized that my presence at certain female community groups or ethnic minority community groups was more than about myself. It was about somebody else. And the power, I realized what the power of sharing stories was quite a few years ago. So that's, I guess, a personal reason as to in terms of why I'm here today. But I really look forward to getting into the discussion with all of you and taking on any questions that you have and as we go through. I will pass the baton to Sham for intro. Okay.
Thank you for kicking off the session, Oli, and sharing your story. It's very inspirational. A little bit about myself. My name is Shanren. Similar to Oli, I spent most of my career working in Deloitte as a cybersecurity consultant. And for the past couple of years, I switched to Google. And right now, I'm managing the cybersecurity program, setting up the strategy for Google's core infrastructure. Now, in addition, I'm also an adjunct professor of cybersecurity at FSU, and I'm an executive coach, women empowerment coach. My niche area is to help women of color to feel confident and find the balance between well-being, power in their workplace, in their home, so that they can lead with courage, lead with empathy, lead with compassion. Similar to Ali, I would like to also talk a little bit about where I come from and what led me to this journey. I have two stories to share. The first one, as you can see, I'm quite involved in the cybersecurity and the privacy space. So the first story is about what the security and privacy means to me and how is this related to DEI, right? How is the security related to inclusion and diversity? I was born and grew up in China, and as most of you, mainland China. So as a lot of you are aware, it is a dictatorship country. So I remember when I was probably only 5 years old, barely understood anything. I was in the kitchen and chit-chatting with my mom when she was cooking. Chairman Mao Zedong was the chairman, the national leader of China, and I grew up 5 years old. I knew that the chanting for the Chairman Mao was "Long, long live Chairman Mao." So being a curious kid, I was asking my mom, why are we saying "Long, long live Chairman Mao," not "Short, short live Chairman Mao"? Because it rhymes. And my mom's face turned immediately, and she looked around. You know, we lived in a courtyard, so she looked outside the kitchen, the window of the kitchen, make sure that nobody was listening, and she said, "Don't say that again." My mom said that in a way to protect me, but since I was at a young age of 5 years old, I did not have the sense of security, and I felt being assessed. I felt being judged. And that thought of being judged carried with me into my adulthood. And it did not help me to feel accepted, feel included. Now, the second story I want to share is also about my childhood in China. Speaking of inclusion, I did not feel included since I was born because I was the second girl born into a traditional Chinese family when son is preferred because they can carry the heritage of the family. My parents loved me. They spent their entire savings to send me to college in the US. And they saved every dime they could in order for me to get the best life I could when I was a child. But in the same time, they taught me that, Shan, you need to prove that you are better than everyone around you. Focus on performing. That will show people that we kept you for good reason. I forgot to mention that my parents wanted to give me away when I was born after they realized I was a girl. I love my parents, and the way that they think is purely a reflection of how they were brought up. I have forgiven them. I have moved on. However, that mentality about I need to perform to prove myself has gotten in the way for me to accept myself who I am, and has gotten in the way for me to accept the people around me or build a workplace that promote inclusion and diversity, because I did not accept myself. This is where I come from. That's how I got on the journey of diversity, inclusion, and equality after realizing that there are a lot of people just like me who was told throughout their childhood, throughout their adulthood, that you are different, you need to do more to be accepted, which is the opposite of truth. And that is when I set my mind to change the mindset, raise consciousness among people around me, one person at a time, and raise the consciousness level among the leaders, one person at a time, so that we can all work together to build the workplace that truly embraces DEI. With that being said, I will pass on to Stefania.
Thank you. So a little bit about me. I am, as Oli and Shan, a consultant. I have worked in the past 10 years in projects, transformation projects in different industries, on different topics, mainly focused in finance, but also in organizational topics. I am really passionate about knowledge sharing, training, helping people overcome their struggles and their limiting beliefs. And this includes me. And one reason, this is one of the reasons I decided to be a coach, and I am being trained in NLP, and I am an NLP practitioner and coach, and I am considering continuing the path on this journey. And yeah, so after on this on my personal side, I am a Romanian, so I'm coming from a next communist country, and in the past 12 years I have lived in France. And being a Romanian in France is not necessarily it's not necessarily, being Romanian is not necessarily the fanciest nationality you could have when you live in a country like France. People from other areas in Europe might not necessarily understand. So this is why I'm going to share a short story about the stereotypes that people in France can have about Romanians. I would start by saying that in Romania, one of the largest minority community are the Romani or Roms. And these people have moved to Western countries. And what they do is that they spend time in the streets begging. So in Romania, in France, many French people have this idea that a Romanian is a beggar. And to the point where actually even on the television, there would be jokes around this. And one that I could talk about is related to this film director that was Romanian. He was an award-winning director at the Cannes Festival. And he was presented as a beggar in a French puppet TV show where they were kind of making fun of famous people. So obviously when things like this happen, the information is widespread. So it's unavoidable that people would make associations between Romanians and beggars. So this is one of the reasons that we as Romanian have some struggles when living in France. And I don't usually talk about this, and know that just having this talk today is for me a boundary that I overcome, because even in my education, I was taught that I should never talk about struggles and difficulties, and I should work and get the results based on my work without complaining. So it is a first for me, and I must say that I need to thank Oli for this, because she actually inspired me to do more and to speak about it, because there are a lot of people who are in difficult situations, and in a way it's not bad to talk about it, because there are a lot of people who might relate to your story, and it's good for them to know they're not alone, and there are things that could be done in order to support them. So thank you for that. And I'm happy to be doing this. One thing that I wanted to mention as well before going forward is that our session was planned to end at 6. So we could use the last 30 minutes for people if there are people who would like to share their stories or insights or whatever they would like to. So feel free to do this. And also about questions, we will try to answer questions. Most likely we will do this when it will be convenient, or at the end, if when the time will allow us. So one question that I would like to address at the beginning to our panelists is the following. Could you please share examples or stories that highlight situation when you did not feel included in a workplace or personal setting, and why? And furthermore, how aware were the people of their levels of inclusiveness around the situation? What can change about it? So I invite Oli to start.
Sure. So I'm going to flip the answer on this. And I, although I was involved in the questions, I actually do not know what's coming. So, and you probably heard I've had a bit of a shocking morning. So I'm just going to really speak very openly, but I'm going to flip my answer on this and talk about a time where I've seen other people not be included, because I think that was more impactful than some of the scenarios that I may have gone through. And I think because of the upbringing I had, which was very, work hard, the world can be unfair, so you need to protect yourself. I went into the workplace with you know, yes, I'm a Black female, but okay, I'm a Black female and next. So I went into the workplace with just the motivation to proceed, right, to the next step. But also I went in without the vulnerability. I went in, you know, that I have today, because that was almost, you know, a bit of a weakness. So I think for me, part of that kind of the aha moment was when I went to my very first community event for the Black community. This is when I was at Accenture, and I had never been to a female community. I'd never been to any women's network or anything like that before. And I went to this event. I was a senior manager in the workplace, and I went to this event, and I remember seeing so many people there. I came in, they were all already sat around a table. There was a lady moderating the session from the States. You know, it was very, very vibrant. And I just sat there and I listened to people share some stories or perspectives. And these were people who were junior to me. There was a couple who were at the same level as me, and there was one probably a little bit more senior. And it just amazed me that this was 2015, 2016, people were saying, you know, at their grown ages, they were really talking about their experiences not feeling included, potentially because of things like they want to bring in their own food, right? So they make their own food, they bring in their food for lunch, but they don't feel comfortable because their food may be a little bit more smelly or whatever the thing is, and they don't feel comfortable. Or because they don't feel comfortable going to after work drinks, because there's a big culture as a consultant, particularly at Accenture, to you know, to always go to socials, particularly pre-COVID, right? And a lot of those socials involve alcohol. But what if you don't drink? And the list just went on. They felt that they couldn't be themselves even by speaking. And remember, how we speak now is so much more honest, right? Because we've gone through phases of, I think, more acceptance. We've accepted the fact that mental health can be spoken about. We've accepted the fact that racism exists and it can be spoken about. And we've accepted the fact that DE&I is really important and it deserves to be up there as well as the bottom line of an organization. So, but like rewind a few years ago, I was really listening to this going, whoa, you know, and all of these different things, like they felt that they couldn't speak their natural tone because it wasn't posh enough. Just the list went on, and I sat there and I just said to myself, wow, like this level of inferiority complex, you know, still exists. And when I was growing up, of course I had a level of inferiority complex. I was the only Black student in my school. You know, whenever you go to, especially if you have the supply teacher who comes in and, oh God, she doesn't know how to pronounce my name. She's going to, you know, get to the next person or the person in the list before me, and then a long pause because she's trying to figure out, how do I pronounce this name, right? So of course I went through that, but I was listening to the younger version of myself who'd gone through this phase of inferiority complex, but got past it. But these were people still, you know, young adults who were talking about their experiences yesterday. So that for me was a real big wake-up call. And I remember going home on that day, and I said to my two younger brothers on the phone, guys, we grew up in the same household. We in Wimbledon. I walk into a room, and these are my two younger brothers. I've got an older brother and an older sister, but I was speaking to my two younger brothers. And I said to them, I go into a room, and granted, I'm more senior than you in my work, but I go into a room and I don't remember sometimes that I'm a Black female. I said, what about you guys? You know, because I was thinking at the upbringing we had, would be consistent for all of us. We would all have this view of, oh, it's fine. And as two black men, they said, they paused and they just said, 100% no. We feel it because we're grown men. You know, we're 6'5" and 6'4", and we're big muscular guys. So we feel it. We feel the looks, regardless of the fact that we all grew up in the same area. And each time I talk about that, I get a little bit upset because it was the reflection, it was the realization for the first time, that my lived experience in the same home, in the same family, than my two brothers was actually different, right? In terms of the lived experience I was having at that particular moment in 2015 or 16. So it really made me understand how you can feel and how inclusion is so important. And somebody wrote on the chat, you know, the analogy about the dance, which I love, but I take it a bit further, right? So diversity is the invitation to the dance. Inclusion is the invitation to be asked to dance, but belonging is the invitation to actually pick the song of your choice. And when you have that you know, you talked to Stefania about what should we be doing. When you have that, for me, that perfect harmony of, I always liken it to a family feeling, the utopia of family, because obviously not all family environments are going to be like this, but the utopia of family is that you can be yourself. I can be corporate professional Ollie, but I can go back and be, you know, a silly kid with my, you know, and be silly, whatever. I can just be completely myself. So when you're able to create that environment for a person, whether it's a friend, a partner, a colleague, whatever environment it is, when you're able to create that environment, then you've got something really powerful. And that's why we have relationships, right? Because you're ultimately feeling, hopefully, your most safe self with that particular person. So the ability for us to take some of those characteristics that we bring to a relationship, right? We bring communication, we bring vulnerability, we bring empathy. You can't just lose that when it gets into the workplace and go, oh yeah, I'll just turn on my corporate robot self and just, you know, get the work done. You need to have the emotional connection. And for me, that's a really big thing. I always talk about energy in motion, right? Emotion. You need to create that sense of emotion in terms of positive emotions for people around you, to feel that they have psychological safety. That's the biggest thing.
I can share my story as well. And thanks, Oli. I wasn't sure if we want to move on to the next question. What Oli said, the part that really resonated with me is that we are all connected. You know, underneath the work we do, the deliverables, the deadlines, we're all human beings. We share the same functions, the same needs, and the same longings, the same wants. That's how we are connected. It reminded me of a nature quest I had this weekend with another executive coach. She actually works at Stanford as well. We went to a botanical garden in Oakland. The first exercise we did, she asked us to do, was to find a tree or tree trunk and put our hands on it and start with 10 deep breaths. Just feel it. Feel connected to the earth, to the soil underneath our feet and the ground. And that moment, not only I felt connected to the nature, I also felt connected to all the other people whose hands was on the same tree. And I felt connected with everyone around me who was standing in the same garden, and I really felt connected with everyone. Reason for starting my story with this background is that fundamentally, we are one, and take it however you want to interpret it. We are all human beings. That's the fundamental truth. That's the belief that I bring into what's around me as well, when I feel like I'm not included, or when I feel like someone else should be included, but it didn't appear so. The first thought that came to my mind is that whatever exclusion that is happening, perhaps it's not intentional. Perhaps it's because people are not aware. So for me, my story is about building the awareness. It's actually, there are two parts. One is the lack of awareness. The second one is when the awareness is there, what action and outcome it led to. So the first story was with my best friend. She is an engineer manager at AWS, and she is from Ukraine. She is a badass woman, and have been on the fast track to get promoted from a I don't know, she started just 5 years ago as just an engineer, and then she kept getting promoted almost every year until she became engineering manager. And then in male dominant tech industry, everyone around her are males. And there they were in this promotion committee and talking about in this room, her with perhaps 5 or 6 males. I forgot the ethnicity, but they were talking about who should be promoted and looking at everyone's criteria. And then one person made a comment that for the DEI initiative, we have, we need to meet some quota to make sure that we have a percentage of female leaders. And another man made a comment saying, brush it off, like, why is that important? The third man made a comment saying that men are head, but the women are the neck. They connect the head with the body. That's why they're important. My friend did not feel comfortable. But there she was in the room with another 6 men who have been there longer than her and older than her, and probably carry higher titles and higher levels in organization than her. And she just laughed along. She was not comfortable. And that happened just last year, and she talked to me. And we were like, what should we do? Do you report to HR? Like, you don't want to be the person who, I'm trying to think about what's the word, right? Makes the squeeze noise on the wheel, and don't, like you're not playing the game, you don't play along. So she felt uncomfortable, I felt comfortable. I also felt powerless and helpless that I was not able to help her. Unfortunately, I don't have the answer to how that story continued. I just knew that we missed that opportunity to create the awareness. I guess, even among her, we could have perhaps just thought through what options she has in order to come to a more conscious choice that she could have made, right? Even if she decided not to say anything or report to HR, at least it comes from a more thoughtful analysis. That's where it's connected between your head and the heart, your guts. You just feel like you cannot do it. One way or another, I think what she settled with, whatever that was, came from fear. That was what I know for sure. Now, the second story was about my story, and I feel fortunate and I feel extremely blessed working in a team with amazing, powerful female VPs, a lot of them, and I feel super supported. And what happened this morning, the cybersecurity program that I'm leading, I'm responsible for setting up the engagement model and the strategy. I was invited into this meeting with the VPs across different functions, and we were talking about the engagement model. for whatever reason, while I was working on this big onboarding package in terms of what the RISI should look like, what the WBS look like, what's our mission, vision, strategy, there is another team who have set up a work stream already. So I was brought into this meeting and I was told that here is your work stream set up. Sha, let us know which one you want to lead. And that's not aligned with what I believe my role is, when I should be involved earlier in that process to set up that program, set up that strategy. And there I was told that here are a couple of boxes. Tell me which one you like to be put in. My VP was not there. And I just, I gave a blank stare. I said, I will think about it. I was a little surprised that I was not involved in the earlier part of the discussion. I said it in the as polite way as possible, and also thinking about let me not be the one who, create a noise. But I just couldn't help. So later, I had a one-on-one with my VP, and I told her that I had this meeting earlier, you were not there, and I was a little uncomfortable because I thought that I'm creating the engagement model, but it just felt like I was presented a couple of boxes and put myself in one of them. This comes down to trust, right? First, I trust my VP. She is a woman that I respect and I aspire to be, and we have this connection that I know I can become 100% vulnerable. And second, I need to accept myself, right? Whether my point of view could be perceived as selfish or could be perceived as narrow-minded, but with the people who I trust, I accept that I made the best choice given the circumstance that I was under, and I choose to be authentic, and I choose to be open with my emotions with people I trust. And as I had predicted, my VP felt really bad about what happened, and she apologized to me a couple of times in our one-on-one, and she also said that I was not close to this area, and I thought someone else had already involved you, and we can set up a meeting with that person to make sure that you are included going forward. So that comes to my point in terms of inclusion or not included. I guess my takeaway would be awareness is key. Finding your people who can champion for you is important. And most importantly, well, there are two parts. The other two parts I want to give them equal importance is that please trust that most people want to do the right thing. Please trust that. Even if we are not comfortable about being open, being authentic, being vulnerable, but try to do your best to show up as who you are. Because when you open up yourself, you'll be surprised about the energy you receive to Ollie's point. And the last part, I actually forgot about my part. I hope the 3 takeaways are enough.
Thank you, Shan. Thank you. You raised a very good point about awareness, and Ollie also mentioned about psychological safety. And I think that those two go together because, of course, some people might not be aware of what you feel if you don't say it, right? And psychological safety comes to creating this space for people to say and speak up and be themselves, right? So the question I would address is how actually should businesses increase or foster psychological safety in the workplace, both in for inclusivity, but also about reporting bad behaviors, because you were also talking about this a bit. It's sometimes hard to talk about bad behaviors that you witnessed, or you've been like you were the person that those bad behaviors targeted. So do you have any recommendations about how businesses should do around to increase this psychological safety? So
should one of us answer the question? I don't mind, Shan, if you want to go on this one. I'm easy. I can do this, or you can go if you want.
Yeah, I can share my view. I think most of our audience are lead alumni or lead all the other leaders. So I really feel this is a safe place for me to be vulnerable and share my history. Hence, here is how the story goes. For everything that I have shared so far, my childhood, the things that happened to me when I grew up, not feeling belonging, and that caused me very, very severe depression since I became adult, because every room that I walked into, every conversation, whether it's in the social circle or in the professional circle, I just could not help comparing myself with someone. There is always at least one person I can pick and start comparing. Am I the smartest one? Am I the most intelligent one? And am I making the best point in this meeting? And as a result, I felt the biggest imposter, and I did not feel safe. I did not feel a little bit psychologically safe to speak up my mind and to be free about, to express my opinion, to raise my concern, to challenge the status quo, to come up a brand new idea that may be considered as silly, but I have, I strongly believe that has changed. And that the moment it changed is when I got the psychological safety. That's why I shared my story about who I was before, and then I will explain what has happened to help me to become more comfortable to just showing up as who I am. I would say, because I don't know about you, I spend more than 8 hours every day in the office. Honestly, the corporate culture for all of us is really important for us to have the psychological safety, right? Of course, it can be who you are in home, but when it comes to psychological safety, it's really about these 8 hours that I spend with my colleagues. Do I feel like I'm being used as a resource by my boss in order to complete a certain task? Do I feel like I need to, I need to build alliance? I need to help this person to complete a certain activity or achieve certain project goals to prove my value to the company? Or am I valued as a human being in this corporate environment for who I am, for the unique point of view that I'm bringing to the table? So I'm grateful again for my company that helped me to shift my mindset from the first part that I'm a tool, I'm a utility, I'm someone on your payroll that has a deliverable to provide for me to be here, to now that we value you, we recognize you as the best asset of my company, and you're here not because you can finish this for me, but because of what's here. You know, I wanted to hear your opinion. That's really what I pay you for. That shift, and I will give you some more tactical examples. That shift created that psychological safety for me, and make me, as you can see, a lot more energetic in the workplace, and a lot more connected with my colleagues, a lot more content with my work. Tactically speaking, a couple of things that happened to make it happen, right? We only have 40 minutes. I don't want to get into too many details, but this included the overall learning, you know, continuous learning, blameless postmodern culture we have in my workplace is Google. Meaning it doesn't matter if you make a mistake. What matters more is what we can learn from it. It also happens in a couple of scenarios where I realized that my boss cares about my feedback, and my boss's boss care about my feedback. It's in Google gives the survey every year that we do, that we feel we respond to the specific question. Let's say that my boss is Ron, my boss's boss is Paris. Shan, on the scale 1 to 10, how included do you feel at your team? Speaking of measurement, on the scale 1 to 10, how, to what extent do you believe Ram or Paris have demonstrated DEI? That's where else is also measured. And this data is benchmarked against the industry practice, benchmarked compared against between different teams, between different leaders, between organizations. And the team has a low, you know, lower than average matrix will, you know, will reflect on what they could have done better and where they can improve. So I hope that addresses your question. You know, we don't have much time. I want to give Ollie the opportunity to share her view as well, or give audience the opportunity to ask questions. Or maybe we can move on to the next question so that we can hear different perspectives.
Thank you very much, Shan. Yes, well, actually, indeed, this measuring the inclusiveness is a big thing from my point of view, because as we already said, like diversity, we can measure it. We have targets, companies have targets, and yeah, we can see numbers, right? But when we talk about inclusivity, I think not many organizations have tools to really measure this. So my question would be, if Ollie, you would like to take this one, is how could we get there? How can we hold people, leaders, companies accountable when it comes to diversity and inclusion, but mainly inclusion? Because diversity, as we said, it's like figures we can see about it. We can check this, but inclusiveness is a lot harder.
Yeah, okay, so a really important topic. So how can we hold leaders to more account in terms of inclusion? So I think it really starts with the incentives for a leader, right? We're motivated by the incentives we get. And if you look at most organizations, most leaders are, when it comes to performance, there'll definitely be a financial metric in there, right? So how much have you brought into the business? What have you contributed to the bottom line? But the shift is not necessarily on, or the focus is not necessarily on, so how much of an inclusive leader were you? How do you even measure that? So in order to hold leaders more to account, we need to see a little bit more of a shift in terms of how we are measured as leaders, and therefore remunerated, and therefore performance measured. So it's all, for me, one big thing together. And I think that comes down to reevaluating and changing the remuneration policies that we have, and not just having performance measurement be solely based on the hard numbers, right? I've sat in a number of reviews, I've done reviews myself for other people, and as much as you have, you know, you may have 5 different metrics that you look at, but really you only have 2 core metrics. Everything else is secondary, and the secondary is typically, unfortunately, leadership. Things like leadership, followership, inclusive leadership, impact leadership. It's not necessarily going to be the main thing that an organization typically looks at when they measure your performance. So if I don't feel that somebody cares enough to go, well, actually, all the work that you're doing on inclusive leadership, it's great, but actually it's not contributing to your successes. The main thing are the financial metrics, then that's going to change my behavior, right? It's going to change my behaviors. It's going to make me go, well, actually, I'm going to deprioritize some of this stuff, and I'm going to reprioritize the things that bring in the revenue and the things that make me profitable. So I think number one, in terms of accountability, is making sure leaders feel incentivized. That is the only way you will change behaviors at the top. So that's point one. But I think in terms of just, you know, how leaders can do more, how they can take account more on this topic, is also just by asking questions. So, you know, Shan talked about the survey that they do at Google. One of the things that I'm looking at in terms of just the measurement of how do you actually better measure inclusive leadership in an organization, does come down to the questions that you ask an employee, but not on a kind of let's roll out the survey every quarter or every year and do the annual survey and get the responses. It has to be dynamic. It has to be, I want to go onto my phone, tap in my responses because I felt something today. I felt I didn't feel included today, or I felt really included, and I want to go rate my experience, right? It's just like I would grab an Uber and pick up my phone, or go onto Instagram and kind of check what's happening and make some engagement. I want to be able to, as a user, as an employee, take the ownership and know that I can record how I'm feeling. So I feel that the simplicity of asking how are you, but really meaning the question, asking, okay, so did you feel included? If not, why? They continue to go down that road, and that requires you to have real conversations with real people. But also, I think the other thing that leaders can do to take more account is to consider the full working experience of somebody coming into the office. So I had a really interesting conversation with a recruitment agency this week, and I wanted to know, you know, what they could do to help us, and also what their DE&I policies were. And it was really interesting because she talked a lot about the fact that whilst they will, you know, they try and place good candidates, they also try to encourage the organizations that they work with to be inclusive employers. So let's say that you have a candidate who has ADHD, right? Little things like, is the photocopier that we have in the office, is it too loud? Little things like that people are like, what is she on about? Yeah, because you don't know, right? So you only know what you know. You only know what you know because you're exposed to something and you understand that this particular thing may not work for this particular person, or if somebody has, you know, whatever it is that they have. But the ability to really start working, for leaders to start working more with their buildings teams, their facilities teams, you know, the entire kind of architecture that exists in an organization to make you feel included. Inclusion isn't just about Stefania telling Ollie, hey Ollie, how are you? Or asking me, how do you pronounce your full name, Oluchi? Right? That's not just inclusion. Inclusion is also, I walk into a room and the room invites me in based on who I am, based on what my experience is, based on some of the challenges that I go through that maybe you can't see, right? One of my younger brothers has Asperger's. Asperger's is on the spectrum of autism. So to any other person, he's just a normal big guy, handsome big guy, but actually he doesn't like to be around people that often, right? But you would never know that if you hadn't really spoken to him. So the ability to really understand and appreciate the differences that we have and bring them into the workplace in a really inclusive way, not just by leaders, but also by people speaking to you, but also by the architecture, you know, as I say, everything that you see around you in the office, the walls, the lift buttons, everything. That for me is the next step. So it's communication, it's remuneration, and it's also the full kind of operating model within an organization.
Thank you very much for these insights. So about what you were saying, building on what you were saying, we also talked some time ago about diversity and inclusion on a 360-degree view, meaning that actually, so there are things that happen in a company, but someone, and even as employee, you know, we have to be inclusive in our, well, at work, but also outside of our work. We cannot just be inclusive at a certain amount of time and a specific setting, right? So this comes with a mindset and something that applies in all the areas of our lives. And same for the companies. We were also talking about how do we apply and how important it is to apply these D&I principles when we talk about our suppliers, our clients, our like external companies and partners that the company might have. I do believe this is a very important thing, and I think that there are many things to be done about this, around this. So I was wondering if you have some insights about this. Like Oli, I invite you to tell us about this.
So this is really on the supply chain.
Yeah. The supply chain, but also about it's also about the client and everything, like everything that is external, because there is this part that is internal, but then it's important to look outside as well.
I completely agree. I talk a lot about, you know, you can't have diversity, equity, and inclusion in the boardroom and then go home and be like, okay, yeah, so back to business as usual. It has to start actually at the breakfast table. So we talk about clients and supply chain. It's also with family and friends, right? So if you have families, if you have children and those children go to school and they only see one version of what a family looks like, that all of their friends and all of mummy and daddy's friends all look the same, then we're automatically creating that isolation, right? And as opposed to diversity. So I think being able to encourage diversity and actually show representation of communities that we all live in, namely one community, and I'm talking about a community where everybody just looks the same. There'll be someone who's different that you potentially don't know is different, even if you're just looking at the surface level. So I think being able to expose the young, our children, to this from an early age is really important. Being able to teach the history of different communities and different people's backgrounds is really important. So for me, it starts at the breakfast table first and foremost. You know, I don't think we can hold leaders to account by just telling them to focus on DE&I in the workplace, and then they jump on LinkedIn in their personal time and they attack someone, like we've seen lots of professionals on LinkedIn, you know, being pretty vocal with very, very unrhetoric responses on certain posts. So we've got to consider that the full spectrum of the experiences that you see. I think in terms of clients, for sure, I know that my clients in financial services hold me and our teams way more to account, right, for diversity. They want to see, when we pitch up and we say, hey, we can help you, they want to see diversity in the people pitching. No longer do they want to see just the same look and feel of people. I've sat across a table, and it was super interesting. This was pre-COVID. I sat across a table with very senior clients when I was at Accenture, and we, you know, Accenture side, client side, and we were pitching for this really big deal. And everyone of my team, all of my team, everyone assumed that the key person in the room was the man because of the role he held. But actually, the key person in the room was the only woman, because she was the one who was actually deciding behind the scenes. She was the one who was in the ear of this other person. And the body language that she had was very, very important. She wanted to see more diversity actually within our team, quite frankly. So it was so apparent to me, and you know, so we made a couple of looks and we held glances a couple of times, and like it was just interesting to see how at times we almost just didn't respond to the questions that she was asking, or gave very quick responses and then wanted to move on to the full presentation, right? Or wanted to give fuller responses to other people. But actually, you know, we completely missed a trick there. But it was really interesting for me to just watch that dynamic. But I think clients are holding us more and more to account, and they're vocal. So now we get, okay, hey, can you help us make sure the people that we see are diverse? So I love that, because it's a conversation that we're starting to have more and more. And I think on the supply chain is like a spaghetti junction. It's intertwined. It's not just the suppliers that we use, it's also the suppliers that those suppliers use, right? So it's the ability to have somebody in your workspace, whether that is your head of facilities or your kind of COO type function, somebody in the workplace whose responsibility it is, whose accountability it is, to make sure that the ecosystem partners that you use as part of your various supply chains, whether it's for stationery or recruitment and skills, or for technology or applications or data or paper or food or whatever, waste or whatever it is, but making sure that you are given the equal, equitable opportunities to different people, and that you are inviting the different people to come and pitch for work, and not just going to the same people. I think in the promo video we shared a stat around, or an insight around the fact that women are unfortunately more likely to be successful in a blind interview, right? And this is by Harvard University. How the hell is that even possible? So if you think about the amount of biases that already go in, that have to exist for that statement to be true, we have to change that. And it's not just like an isolated bubble in the workplace. It's at home, it's with our clients, and it's with the full ecosystem of suppliers. So those are just a few examples of, I think, what we can be doing.
I have witnessed a very, very similar situation to the one that you were describing, with the woman who was actually the deciding person, and the man who was considered, or people thought of him that he was the one. I think this happens more often than we think of. We are, well, time-wise, I would like to go through one maybe last question. around what would be, I don't know, 2-3 things that businesses should be doing in order to make lasting change when it comes to inclusion and belonging. And how can we know that it works? So who would maybe Shan, would you like to answer to this? I can also share my ideas.
Yeah.
But
I'm more than happy to share some of the work that the changes I'm bringing to Google. I'm leading a DEI initiative, and one of the key deliverables as part of this initiative is to develop the well-being manifesto. Well-being manifesto meaning how do we define what do we mean by well-being in the way that is understood by everyone and that is followed by everyone, and that is reflective of the new norm. The new norm means that the new hybrid environment. So the well-being manifesto is going to address how we show up as individuals, how we communicate to each other as a team, and how we support each other as a community. To be more specific, this is our one of the key initiatives that I'm leading to support the DEI. We had a rapid growth Google-wide and my organization specific as well. A lot of new people joined the company in the middle of the pandemic. They have not seen anyone else in the team in person. There is no such thing about the coffee, the hallway chat, or getting together at lunch, get to know each other. They just got thrown into this new virtual world with a couple of strange faces and trying to work on the problems from meetings to meetings. On top of that, we went through a very intense and very overwhelming launch. There were a lot of occasions that folks had to work during the weekends or jump on the call to put out a fire. And that has added a lot of burnout and a lot of stress to people, especially when it comes to boundaries. Let's say that I'm new to this team. Speaking of DEI, diversity and inclusion, this inclusion applies to everyone, applies to anyone who is new or who feels new to a group, want to be accepted, want to have the sense of belonging, but they don't know where they fit in and they do everything they can to feel accepted. So for those new team members who joined during the middle of the pandemic, for them to be accepted is to make themselves available and hop on the calls whenever they were asked to, even it's after the office hours or even during the weekend, because they did not know how to say no. So very specific, as a part of that well-being manifesto, we made it clear about make everyone comfortable to say no. And that is leadership's responsibility. After we created the well-being manifesto, I presented in the leadership meeting, make sure that this message needed to be modeled by managers, by directors. And this includes, unless absolutely necessary, please do not send out emails or ping your team during the weekend. There are workaholics or there are people who genuinely love working during the weekends, which is fun. That could be one of the reasons that leadership arrived at their position. But I had to teach my VP how to set the schedule send so that she can do all the work that she wants. But you set out the schedule to send, delay the send to Monday. Because when your team gets that email, they feel like they have to work during the weekend. So back to your question in terms of some of the things we can start doing to promote more inclusion and diversity is, as a leader, start to think about, am I Am I modeling diversity and inclusion to the best of my knowledge? Am I being transparent and vulnerable to my team that, hey, I'm also new to this. I may not know where the boundary is, but I really want you to feel comfortable to tell me, tell me when I made a mistake, biased or unbiased, consciously or unconsciously. I just want you to be comfortable to tell me because I want to learn. Leaders need to be open to learning. And honestly, DEI is new to everyone, to leaders, to us. We are learning what is our boundary. We are learning to feel free to express about what makes us uncomfortable. So creating that psychological safety and just be open about what we don't know. Perhaps start to tell people that whoever you report to you, do not respond to my emails. Set up a boundary for yourself. Don't respond to my email during the weekend. If I make mistakes, I want you to call me out. It's for my own good. And you have every permission to say no to me.
Thank you. Very good point. What I would add also is around the awareness. Sometimes we already mentioned this during our discussion. I think that it is important to train people and to train the leaders about the biases in everything that is around D&I, because sometimes people don't even know, we talk about psychological safety. Some leaders might not know how to create that space for people to feel that comfortable. They don't know how to be vulnerable. Because of a lot of reasons why it's our education, is our way of being, whatever. There are a lot of reasons. And I think that training sometimes can also fill in these gaps and bring those informations that could help someone really take action. I don't know, Oli, if you want to add something on this before wrapping up.
No, I think you guys have added nicely to that, so I don't think I need to add anything else. But happy to take any questions from the audience if you have any, or wrap up.
Okay, that's really interesting what you ladies brought here, and I think a lot of us, if not all, can relate with the being diverse, right? Which it does not mean that you have to be a woman or a certain color, but diversity comes in many shapes. It is not only to, as I mentioned, to be a woman or to be a person of color, but it can be also to be neurodiverse, as I think Oli mentioned, or to be an immigrant, right? And I can also relate to many of this personally. We have a huge change effort in front of us to educate our leaders and really to help them tune to the old good what's in it FM radio, right? What's in it for me? So they are more motivated to create that psychological, emotional, safe space, and do not claim that diversity is, we have that certain amount of women in the leadership, or we have this, I don't know, let's say some other denominator that shows just the number, but that we talk about the real inclusion and belonging, right? Where people feel heard, where people feel good, right? I have noticed that we all diverse people, and I claim myself diverse for many reasons as well. We have developed an extremely good adaptation mechanism, and this is what characterizes survivors. So we are the survivors, and it is. I think this whole event, this whole Me Too event, and is there here to help us be, you know, and more enthusiastic about the change. And I also would like to finish that with a statement like, when we enter the room on Wednesday, let's make sure that the room invites us and that invites our colleagues, our peers, right? And that we all feel heard, feel appreciated, and feel that this is a great place to show our uniqueness and be appreciated. Very good. Any other comments?
I love that. I love that last quote from you. So they enter in the room. Unfortunately, I won't be there to join you, but honestly, it's been great for us, I think, all to have had this session, and for you guys to allow us to share our thoughts and perspectives. And for anyone who does want to follow up with us, then please feel free to do so. But it's been great talking about this really important topic.
Yes, you ladies, I think, have a lot of things in your hands to make things different, and I think not only you but all of us. And I want to thank you very, very much for that wonderful discussion. I hope this will continue offline as well and during our socials. And for everyone else, again, please fill in or fill out the questionnaire, the feedback form. What did you like? What can be done better? And we see you tomorrow at 8 a.m. Pacific time.
One more plug, actually. So actually, when we talk about this, we've had a really good session. Hopefully you think so. But just to keep the momentum, I do want to plug the fact that we did a really cool interview with Bracken Darrell, who's the CEO of Logitech. I think we posted something on Workplace, but the interview was on inclusive leadership. Luckily so one of the things I didn't mention is I set up this organization called Fully Boss, which is all around helping people advance in their careers and using soft skills. And as part of that, we produced some content, which was this video with Bracken on this really important topic, and he's a very big supporter of it. So working with Stefania and also some of the leader committee, or the lead faculty, I guess, we've secured that content to be part of the Diverse by Design course that will be taught from the spring. So it's just a little way of ensuring that a lot of the things that we've discussed today will be featured in some of the upcoming lead modules. So quite proud of that. And so for anyone who might be taking the course, look out for the content. Thank you.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Please make sure you put the names and information on our workspace.
Okay, will do.
Okay. Well, with that, we have finished the first day of Me2We, which was great, full of wonderful discussions, participation, engagement. I want to thank everyone who stayed with us until the end. I think it was great discussion, and see you tomorrow at 8. Enjoy your evening, everyone.
Hey,
thank you very much. Thank you.
Everyone. See you.